Good morning, and welcome to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
We welcome you to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday on October the 28th. I'm Gary Stevens. In about an hour, we'll be joined. Patty Vandenberg will have what's new around Howland. We'll have some open line after the 10 o'clock news block and after the 11 o'clock news block. And at about 10:35 or so, we'll be joined by Ottawa County Commissioners Joe Bauman and Doug Zylstra. But our first half hour, we welcome back Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor and 58th District Court Judicial candidate Juanita Bocanegra to WHTC's Talk of the Town. Juanita, good morning, and hope all is well with you and the family.
Good morning, Gary. Yes, all is well. Thanks be to God. We are just in the home stretch here before the big day.
Voting early. And I'm going to ask you a question that's not a judicial question. It's a political question. Does it make a big difference if people vote early or vote on the 3rd? Is it, how important is it in case, in your particular case, trying to get your name out as you are vying for the judicial seat that is going to be vacated by the retiring Susan Jonas?
It certainly changes the way we campaign, Gary. With early voting and absentee ballot voting, we had to be aware of that and try to get the name out there and try to get the information into voters' hands, trying to connect with them. Throw into that mix the pandemic, and it has been a bit chaotic. There's been a lot of uncertainty. It certainly does change the game plan because the mailers that would normally have gone out the week before or 2 weeks before at the most, the November election date, had to be mailed out sooner. In terms of trying to get the signs out, normally signs don't go out until October for the November election. We were trying to get signs out earlier, trying to time it about the time when absentee ballots went out. So yes, a lot of changes this year.
And also, you have to make sure it's timed just right. So it's not too early. Then people would think, oh, I got to vote for you in August, but not too late. Oh, I've already given my ballot out. I've already voted. And, it's a juggling game, at least in 2020.
It has been. A juggling game would be a good way a mild way to phrase that. Yes.
If you got a question for judicial candidate Juanita Bocanegra, she'll be happy to answer it at 395-1450, 395-1450. As we are in the final week before the November 3rd general election, Juanita, how much of your work is campaign? How much of it is being the assistant prosecutor in Ron France's office with the Ottawa County Prosecutor's Office?
I continue to be an assistant prosecuting attorney full-time. Campaign work happens during lunch, before work and after work. And with the time change coming up here on us, there's not a whole lot that I am able to do between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock when it starts to get dark. So the days have been getting shorter and shorter, but we have been working on the campaign 6 days out of the week. Long days on Saturdays, and Sundays are the only days that we don't do any campaign stuff.
Let's not say, okay, I'm planning to, I win and I become a judge, in about a month's time. Do you have to start thinking about, I got to tidy up all my casework with the prosecutor's office? Can you even think about that, or you even want to think about that?
I do not want to be presumptuous. So yes, it's something that we will have to think about and something we will actually have to do and handle after the November 3rd election. But I don't want to put count the chickens before they hatch and put the cart in front of the horse. Right now, I'm just praying and doing everything I can. We will see what happens on November 3rd, and then we will go from there.
Now, you're in a situation where Ron France, the current prosecutor, is stepping down. He is retiring. How has he handled his last few days in office, observing it as an assistant prosecutor and seeing how he's taking care of the caseload, being able to make the transition to whoever steps up to become the next prosecutor? How is he handling it?
He's handling it very well. He hasn't really changed his schedule or his routine. Ron is always in the office bright and early. He's usually the first person in the office. Sometimes before 7, we're getting emails of stuff that he's getting out to us. That has continued to be his norm. The next person that will more than likely be our next prosecutor is Lee Fisher, who's currently our chief assistant. Lee has been working very closely with Ron in terms of the dynamics of the office and running the office and all the information that he needs. So they meet often. I'm not always privy to all the information that they exchange, but I'm sure that the office will be in good hands. Ron has been an excellent prosecutor, one of the best bosses I have ever had. He will be missed, but he is certainly working hard to make the transition as smooth as possible with Lee.
Sometimes we only hear about the prosecutor when they step forward in a high-profile case. Some prosecutors, they let their assistants and their deputy prosecutors handle the actual in-court trial situations, and they only are administrators at most. We've seen Ron in action in some of the high-profile cases, actually trying the case for the people of Ottawa County. Give us a little insight as to how Ron France has been as a prosecutor. You mentioned about his work ethic and all that, but maybe give us a glimpse of Ron France that we normally would not see in the general public as he retires as the county prosecutor.
He is very careful when he prepares his cases, meticulous. He crosses all the T's, he dots all the I's. He works closely with the detectives. He makes sure that he has the information in a form that is the most easily presentable to the jury so that he can explain to a lay person the elements of each crime. Something that I've always admired about Ron is that he gets down and he actually does all the work that an assistant prosecutor does. Like you mentioned, the difference, he's not just doing the administration. He does that, but then he also works the actual cases. He is in court every week. I think he's in court almost every day. So he leads by example, and he's been a great boss.
In that regard, if you are to be the next 58th district judge, maybe some of what he has done in preparing a case for trial and relating what the charges are, the options are to the jury, could also translate to a judicial situation where you might have to explain in a preliminary hearing setting, sort of a knotty criminal situation with maybe not so much with jurors, because the district court is not as much of a jury heavy court as a district court is. But a lot of times, especially with people who may not be well versed in the law, they can get a little confused over what exactly the law means or what it doesn't mean. And maybe that experience will help in that regard if you are elected judge on Tuesday.
I'm sure it will. Yes.
Okay, yes, I spent all this time explaining it.
Well, yes,
yeah.
That's a training that we started getting even from law school. When I was in law school, there was a movement towards, plain English and simplifying legalese so that lay people could explain it. Our judges, both at the district court level and the circuit court level, do an excellent job of explaining things to jurors, simplifying the jury instructions and explaining to them what their duties are and what everything means. So they are already doing that, Gary. But yes, having the example of Ron and how hard he works to make sure that the juries understand the cases will help me if I were to prevail in this election, as I prepare for that next phase and next role.
Talk a little bit, and maybe it's a tough question for you to answer. By the way, if you got a better question for Juanita, more happy to do that. 395-1450, 395-1450. Talking with Assistant Ottawa County Prosecutor Juanita Bocanegra. I put the S on because I'm thinking of the maiden name, which is Flores. But if you got a question for judicial candidate Juanita Bocanegra, 395-1450. Maybe it's not a fair question to you because you are running for a judicial office, but we have just seen a lot of a lot of rancor in the public forum over the appointment and now subsequent swearing in of Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's one thing to have judges that are not, beholden to the ballot box. They have to not campaign. They are appointed and they can stand above the process. But there's another thing about accountability. You want the judges to be accountable to the people. It's a fine question whether or not should we vote for all the judges? Should they all be appointed? How do you stand in that situation?
There's no easy answer to that, Gary. It's not a situation even where I can say it's half one way and six dozen the other. It's 6 one way and half dozen the other. It's tricky because for the very reasons you've just stated. On the one hand, you want a judge that is not going to be concerned about politics, that is not going to be concerned about the next election. You want a judge that is going to rule as fairly as possible, just taking the law as it's applying it to the facts in front of him or her. On the other hand, you also want to have a judge that is going to be accountable to the community he or she serves. And the one way to be accountable is to have these elections where the people can decide, do we want to continue to allow this person to serve us from the bench, or are we unhappy with his or her performance? And it's time to get somebody else on there, to have a new person on there. So I'm not going to pretend to say this is the way it should be done and this is the best answer. I think the dilemma is real. I wish that there was a way where judges could have accountability, but not have to worry about the politics of it, because at the end of the day, judges are human, just like any other individual in any profession. And there is a lot of pressure from the community. There's a lot of pressure from various angles coming towards the judge when it comes to interpreting the law, when it comes to sentences especially. I think the oath is something that judges take very seriously when they say, these are my duties and this is the way I'm going to perform. And doing that to the best of the judge's ability without being concerned about the next election is, I'm sure, a struggle, an internal struggle that every judge faces from time to time.
Yeah, because you don't want to have to say, well, if I rule in a case, now maybe not so much in a district court case, because district court basically in a criminal situation clears it up, makes a decision whether or not a case goes to the circuit court where a sentence will be adjudicated for the most part. District court has a little bit, not as, they're like the opening round, the preliminary round, I think.
Opening round with cases that are punishable, with felonies, cases that are punishable by more than a year. Criminal cases punishable by a year or less are still handled at the district court level. Okay.
But the reason why I'm sort of qualifying is that you don't have to worry about, if I have to render a verdict, and it's not a jury trial, and it's a judicial trial, if I render a verdict this way, will it come back to bite me in the election? You don't want to have to think about that. And when you are appointed, you don't have to think about it. If you have to run for re-election, that could be in the back of the mind.
It could be in the back of the mind. But again, we go back to the judge's role is to just take the law as it's written and apply it to the facts, not to legislate from the bench. And this is where integrity comes in, and where it's very important, where a judge has to decide what is the right decision in this case, whether it's going to be the popular decision or not. What does the law say, and what's the right thing to do?
395-1450. Let's get to the phones. Good morning. You're on the line with Assistant Prosecutor Juanita Bocanegra. Hello, you're on the air. And goodbye, you're off the air. 395-1450, 395-1450. And again, we'll have open line time following the 11 o'clock news. The other point I wanted to bring up in bringing about impartiality and accountability, and to a certain extent, that's the dilemma that I've been posing over the last couple of questions. It was brought up in the testimony and the questioning of the Supreme Court candidate Amy Coney Barrett, whether or not she would have her beliefs and her feelings be a part of any decision. She said, and I'm just paraphrasing, she said that, no, I am not going to let my emotions or my beliefs factor into my decisions. It will be based strictly on the law. That's a nice thing to do, but we're all human. And it's sometimes hard to keep that out of our decision making, be it in the case if you want to be a judge, or even in our case, trying to decide whether or not, should I listen to that particular story, or should I watch that particular program? It's hard to not have our feelings and our beliefs get in the way or be a part of our decision making process.
Yes, Gary. It's hard not to be human. We're all designed that way. And no matter how hard we try, sometimes we have to make that conscious decision of this is what I'm going to do, even though I personally may or may not agree with it. We have to set the personal stuff aside.
Yeah, I hate to say it, sometimes that's easier said than done.
Absolutely agree.
And I'm going to ask one more question and we'll take a break. And I'm thinking of an image for me. Since he became a judge in the Kent County District Court, Circuit Court, I always feel that there is maybe some sentiment among those who are wanting to be scofflaws of the law in Kent County. If you got caught and you have to go to a trial, you don't want to see Mark Trusak behind the bench. He has a very strong background and has been known to put in a short term, throwing the book at people when they have been found guilty. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing to have sort of a rep about, hey, he's a tough law and order judge, or in your case, she's a tough law and order judge? Is that sometimes good and sometimes not so good?
I think whatever reputation, a prosecutor, a judge, a defense attorney has can work both ways. It cuts both ways. It can be good. It can be bad or not so good. I would like to earn a reputation for holding people accountable, but doing it with compassion. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's expecting perfection from anybody. However, I think that in order for any one of us to be ready to accomplish change, we need to first acknowledge our wrongs. Again, because we're not perfect. One of the first questions that Judge Jonas asked me was, if you are elected, what is your intent with regard to our treatment courts? And I have every intent of continuing those courts. I think those are great programs, and I plan to continue them if I'm elected to the bench. But one of the key points of those treatment courts is that you are going to have individuals who are struggling with many different things in life, in addition to the addiction that they're trying to overcome. And there are going to be times when that person goes back to old habits once, twice. That is part of the treatment program. So again, I hope that the reputation I would earn if I'm elected is somebody that would hold people accountable, but that would do it with compassion. And I don't want to be that judge that people are afraid of coming before. I also don't want to be the judge that said, everybody thinks you're not going to have any consequences for your wrong. So trying to find that middle ground is difficult, but that would be my goal, is just trying to find the middle between accountability and compassion.
Good morning. You're on the line with Juanita Bocanegra.
Good morning. You were talking about the new Supreme Court justice that was just okayed, and I just want to say they made the right choice. And the law states thou shalt not kill, but yet 48 senators voted to kill newborn babies up to conception. So hopefully she does uphold the law that says thou shalt not kill. Thank you. I'll listen for the response.
I appreciate the call. 395-1450, 395-1450. Yeah, there's a moral question, but also, Anita, you got to follow the law as well.
That is correct. I've been telling people when I've been meeting with them and they've been asking me, what do you believe the judicial role to be? And I believe that it is to take the law as it's currently written and apply it to the facts. A judge's role is not to legislate from the bench. We have three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, and we have checks and balances. Every branch needs to be responsible for what they need to do and not be able to, or not try to go into the next area. It works. The system works when everybody performs their own role. So that is the judge's role.
My question to you, my last question in our segment is this, Juanita Bocanegra. What have you learned over the last 2+ months in this campaign that you will use going forward? Win or lose? No, let's not talk about a draw. We don't need to have another election. What have you learned over the last couple of months about yourself? I think, about yourself more than anything else over the past couple of months.
I have learned that there is always more go than I think. The days are long, the weeks are short. I have been feeling exhausted for days now, having been working on this campaign day in and day out, 6 days a week, almost every waking hour. Even if I'm working here in the office, in the back of my mind is, what do I need to do when I get out? And what do I need to do at lunch? So what I have learned about myself, been reminded about myself, because I learned this, I think, when I was doing law school weekends and weeknights while working full-time, a full-time job and a part-time job. There's always more go. I can only worry. Sometimes I have to break things up and only worry about today. Where do I need to be today? What do I need to do? Of course, I need to look at what's coming up ahead so that I can plan accordingly and prepare for that. But I can't be stressing about next week. Right now, I have to worry about today. Yesterday, I was working on cases that were on the docket for yesterday, and I was preparing for today's dockets, looking at today's cases. And I knew that there were other cases coming up later in the week, and I was having attorneys email me about them. One of the things that I've always trying to be good about is trying to respond to emails and return phone calls before I leave if possible. But sometimes you just need to worry about today. So we have more go in ourselves than we think we do. Just try to break it down and focus on the task at hand. I have also learned that the community that I work in, that I live in, and that I serve, is much more gracious. In given the dynamics of everything that is going on, given what's going on across the country, this community is awesome. A lot more gracious, empathetic. I'm proud to live here. I love this community, and having to campaign in this community has reinforced all of that.
She is Juanita Bocanegra, the Ottawa County Assistant Prosecutor, running for a 58th District Court Judge seat on the November 3rd ballot. Juanita, thank you very much for joining us today on WHTC's Talk of the Town.
Thank you, Gary.